Welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get our seats. Thank you so much for coming. Who was here at the first meeting we did in this space? Raise your hand. Okay. Who was not here? First time hearing about this in person. Okay, a whole bunch of you. So that means that we are bringing you up to speed, and I'm gonna let Brian do that, but I wanted to introduce myself and my wife. Come here, Sarah. My name is Josh Brown, and this is Sarah, and we live there on Olive Branch, behind the scary gate, down the scary driveway. No, I'm just kidding, it's really pretty. Hope you all visit, and we have had this idea, not at this property for a long time. One second, turn the music off. And come on, there we go. We've had this idea for a long time in different iterations, but I wanted to, Sarah, you want to say a quick word about that? And thank you all for coming. So I really appreciate it, and we just want you to know that we're here to share with you our vision, but we're also here to listen. So here's Sarah.
Yeah, well, he's lived in Indiana most of his life, and when we first got married, we moved back after finishing school, and we had some time living in Europe and traveling around small villages, but I grew up, my parents were artists, and we would travel all over the United States and do art festivals in beautiful town centers all over the USA. And when we would go to the art festivals, they would close down the streets, and the center of the communities would be a pedestrian zone. And as a kid, it was magic. We could just run around in the streets, explore the art festival, the food trucks. I love the beautiful historic architecture, the fountains, and as a young child growing up, going to these town centers, I fell in love with the idea of a town designed for children, where children could have freedom to enjoy the towns just like I did when the art festivals would close down the streets. And so that is a childhood dream. Now, when we were searching for this property, we were looking for a 10-acre property to actually build a educational resource center that's kind of a Montessori type of space on a farm. And we ended up finding this perfectly beautiful property which included 22 acres, and we loved how there's neighborhoods all around because the long-term vision was to create this beautiful like preschool all the way through high school type of educational environment where kids could come, enjoy nature, play, learn life skills, and then learn career-focused education. So kids could learn about the careers that they're passionate about. So originally, the plan was to build a campus. And we found this property that was zoned for agriculture, church, school, and residential, as well as greenhouse, nature center, library. The zoning was there for everything we were dreaming of at the time. So once we opened the Fun School Education Center 2.5 years ago, people began coming and saying they never want to leave. And people began bringing their grandparents, and the grandparents began saying they never want to leave. And I'll wrap it up here, but one time while we had our education center opened, a little boy came up to me. He was about 6 years old, and he said, "Ma'am, I heard that there's some children who actually live here." And then he says, "What do I have to do to be one of them?" And that is why we're building a village.
So I wanted to introduce the designer, the lead designer of the firm that we have hired to help us design what this is going to be. So I'm going to introduce Brian Wright of TPUDC. Yes. Yes.
I searched the world to find somebody who could build what was in my imagination, because to design this, and he's already designed things like this all over the country, and now he's working for us.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, especially whoever said whoop whoop. That was awesome. I don't think that's ever happened to me before. So what I'm going to do is run you all through a presentation real quick, and just kind of, for those who are first timers, catch you up to speed a little bit on the things we talked about, in the opening presentation and other meetings subsequent to that. And then I'm going to show you all what we've come up with. And I'm excited about it, and hopefully you all will be too. Turn the lights on a little bit here.
Sound okay?
Can you hear me okay? All right, great. So I get to be the one to stand up in the front of the room and show you all this, but I can't take all the credit for it. I have a whole team that works with me. And then also Sarah and Josh are not like our normal clients. They actually have visions and, you know, a real idea, and at least one of the two of them can actually draw some things too. And so it really helps for us to understand what's in that head, get out on the page. And then we also, instead of just having, you know, planners and designers and architects on the team, we wanted to make sure that what we were doing had you know, a reality check going on in real time. And so we brought Craig with us, who works with me, to focus on the implementation side of things, to actually crunch numbers and look at financial feasibility and all that. So as we were, you know, sort of sketching out things, he could say, I don't know if you want to do that, you may need to change this or do that. And so it was really helpful, because when you have such a dreamy kind of project to work on, as you'll see in a minute, it's easy to let that, you know, sort of the imagination start to turn into hallucination, right? And so Craig was kept our feet on the ground, right? So as Sarah mentioned, the current zoning allows for lots of things, but predominantly in this area is the single-family residential. So you can see all the neighborhoods that are around us. This is the property here. You know, these are great neighborhoods. Many of you are probably from who do we have neighbors in the room? We have some neighbors? Awesome. And so they're built in the sort of typical, you know, American subdivision type of way, you know, single use, and that means you have to get in your car for everything and go, you know, drive around, and the next thing you know, everybody's saying, oh, we've got traffic, and complaining about that because you've all had to get in your car for everything. So one of the ideas that we'll talk about through this is creating a place where you can actually walk to do useful things and for recreation and all that, so you don't have to get in your car nearly as much. So there's a real benefit to the neighbors and help reduce traffic actually as we go. So what we'll be doing is proposing a PUD, or planned unit development, essentially coming up with a vision and then writing new zoning specifically for the property that, you know, is tied to the vision, so that you know, what we show in these images ultimately is what happens, right? And so we don't show these what we think are great images, and then all of a sudden it's something different than that, and everybody's going, wait a minute, what happened? So here we are. You all know the site, but we have some of this for out-of-towners. It's a really great location, you know, proximity to the interstate there, the highway, you know, the main thoroughfares of Olive Branch and others. And but this is the thing I love this picture. So this is the property here, and you see all the neighborhoods around, and we're sort of this like oasis of green in the midst of what I imagine probably looked much like this before all the subdivisions came in. And the typical development strategy around here is that you take down all the trees and then, you know, put in your subdivision. That's normal here and around the country too. And so ultimately, I think, you know, what Josh and Sarah have really focused on is making sure that, you know, this oasis stays an oasis in its own right, while transforming, but still keeping that idea of the green and all that. Because the zoning is set up, you know, for more of this, right? And so, you know, I think there's a lot of that, and so that's great. But we want to try to offer something a little different that's a win-win. If you haven't been past the gate and been down the alley or the driveway, it's these beautiful maples that turn, you know, fiery red in the fall, and you know, back there are pastures and these beautiful specimen trees that were brought in, planted years ago, and they've grown and they're just majestic. And so what we wanted to try to do is figure out a way to work around those trees, which is a real challenge. You know, a lot of times on a wooded site, you have lots and lots of trees, but none of them are particularly special, and so you can lose a few and it's not a big deal. For us, there's so many special trees that were just like, oh man, how do you even think about getting rid of one of them, So yeah, and they actually, some of them are named. There's the climbing tree, and then there's and actually we put that in some of the drawings, and they're important place markers in the community already on the farm. So our process was set up where we had a multi-day event. We started on the 6th, and we had an opening presentation where we kind of went through and shared big ideas of like planning. We talked about some of the things that we're talking about now. And then we had a series of meetings of different topics, and those were attended. Those are actually on the farm, so people came and participated in those. So we talked about, neighborhood character and design. We talked about utilities, infrastructure, and transportation. We talked about nature and open space as well. And we had people from the county that attended, the county officials, as well as interested citizens and neighbors. So this was the opening presentation. And during that time, after the presentation, everyone gathered around these tables with maps of the property, and they got to be planners for the night and sketch out their ideas and things that they were interested in, and give us ideas. Oh, you could connect to our neighborhood right here because right now we've got sidewalk to nowhere, and those sorts of things. And so that was really fun. And so you see everybody kind of gathered around, working hard. Then we had the topical meetings. These are where we're talking about utilities and whatnot, because those sorts of things came up. And then we also, very interestingly, had our design studio set up right there on the farm, in the house, in the next room. So we had the topical meetings, and my team could hear what we were saying in those meetings and respond real time, because when we showed up, we hadn't put pen to paper. So we came and we talked to the community first before we started drawing, which is very different. If you've ever seen how development normally goes, it's normally like, we kind of go in the back closet there and come up with some ideas, and then you sort of hope no one's paying attention, and then, not us, but others. And then you say, hey, we're gonna do this project. It's gonna be great, you'll love it, okay? And then they go through the process with the county, and then the county says yes or no, and you have an opportunity to talk then. So for us, we believe in, if we're gonna create a community-focused project and neighbors, something that's in it for the neighbors as well, shouldn't we talk to the neighbors first and see what the neighbors might like to see? And so that's kind of what our process has been. And so we're literally all working here, designing, drawing. Here's me drawing on my iPad. And we heard a lot of things during our process. We heard focus on education. People said we'd like to have vendors and farmers markets, outdoor concerts and summer events, family-oriented town center, maker space, partnering with local charities and organizations. People had concerns about drainage and parking and traffic, and so we've been thinking about that as well. And then meaningful open spaces and recreational opportunities. So these are just some of the things that were said to us, and we started trying to incorporate as we went. So we created a set of design principles and kind of big ideas. We call it thinking about a center for community learning, celebration, and connection, which is kind of what's happening already on the property. And so we're trying to sort of how do you take that, formalize it, and open it up so that it's not just people who are coming to the co-op, the homeschool co-op, or to pick up their CSA shares or whatever. And so some of the core principles are building with nature, the preservation of the existing trees and plants on the property, outdoor recreation, making it pedestrian friendly, the idea of having neighborhood amenities, artists and arts and maker focused is a key thing, education, mixed use, community agriculture, entrepreneurial opportunities, community gathering spaces, some housing options, old world character, and then maybe this most important bottom one, kid-friendly / free-range children. So if you're not familiar with free-range children, it's a thing. It's a movement around the country and around the world. And there aren't many places like that in America at all. Everything's focused around the car. So that's something we wanted to figure out how to incorporate into our process. So these are some pictures of some of the things that currently happen on the farm. And they actually have regular small gatherings. They have large gatherings sometimes. And the thing that's kind of neat about it is, they may have 200 people there, and nobody realizes it, and which is really great. And so I got to experience the homeschool co-op that happens. There were like 150 kids of all ages running around and doing all kinds of awesome things, and I'm just like, man, I got to bring my kids to this, and we don't homeschool, but man, they would love this, and it was just fun to watch, and it was something that I'm so thankful, and it's part of the reason why we set up our mobile office the way we do, because had we not experienced that in person, we couldn't have understood what it was, right? It's been explained to us, but now we experience it, and now we see like, oh, okay, and that we made design choices based on what we experienced with that. So it's great, and people are going there right now, not just kids for learning, that grown-ups are going too. So they do these like blue zone dinners and cooking and classes and things where people learn about the healthiest places in the world, where people have the longest lifespan. What do they do different than everywhere else? And a lot of it comes to what they're eating, and so people come to learn from Sarah and others about these things. And so there's kids learning, there's adults learning, there's it's just a wonderful place and experience. So the idea of building with the landscape, again, I felt compelled to show this image to you guys, these images to you, because that's not what you normally get with development around here. They actually have done a good job here in the neighborhood. There's some trees that were saved, but for the most part, most of the neighborhoods are clear cut. This is a new neighborhood in Alabama, just outside of Birmingham, and all of these are existing trees that they worked around and made sure that they saved them. And it looks like this has been there forever as a result of it, because the trees have been there for a long time. So it makes it have that sense of establishment, and the idea of this sort of biophilic design, where sort of at one with nature, and all the greenery that you can see out of the window and experience as you walk through the trails and paths. So for us, again, preserving those trees is going to be important. You have to be very thoughtful about preserving them. You can't just hope they get preserved. You have to go out there, you have to sort of specify exactly how it's going to be saved and whatnot, and make sure that the crews that are out there working on it understand the vision and the mission. This is one of the important trees on the site right now. So this is one of the stations for the co-op that happens underneath. And is this the mud kitchen? Is that what this is? Yes, right? So if you haven't made a mud pie in a while, this is the place for it. They have the best mud pies in town, different than the pies they sell in there. But the kids go crazy here and they love it. So this was obviously a tree that would be worthy of saving, amongst many others. Other things like wildlife-friendly design. This is so easy to do. It doesn't really cost anything. You just have to be thoughtful about it. Planting pollinator species, saving the existing habitat and whatnot. But it can become a meaningful part of what happens there, and another educational opportunity, people going around and learning about these things as well. So farm life, normally I have random stock images that I'm showing for this when we talk about farm life, but these are actually, there's Sarah and some of the kids, and this is the farm. These are farm life things happening there. And so we want to keep that going as well, and we couldn't do that if we just developed all the land, so that's going to be important. Having trails and parks and that recreational component of it. Again, we heard many of the neighbors come in, talk about sidewalks to nowhere. So we want to become the somewhere that the sidewalks are leading. And so the sidewalks turn into trails, turn into paths that are going between the farm fields and the gardens and all the different things. And so, and then people biking around as well. And then looking at, like playgrounds and stuff there that aren't just sort of the, plastic play equipment. They're like made from natural materials, and things can be quite meaningful as well. Stormwater, we heard about some of the flooding concerns that people have had in some of the nearby neighborhoods. In the past, there's been some major floods, and so obviously we have to follow all the local and federal rules and regulations about stormwater and flooding and all that. But for us, what we like to do is actually take what most of the time is just sort of a perfunctory utilitarian thing and turn it into a thing of beauty, a thing where you can actually teach as well. And so the idea of, these are all stormwater features and elements. This is what's called a green alley. This actually used to just be an alley with just asphalt down it, and they converted it and they made it where the water can come and permeate through the pavers here and into the soil and recharge the aquifer. bioswales, and like, can you imagine a kid actually just like looking at the storm sewer? Probably not, but a bioswale catches someone's attention. And then just things that are beautiful, like little rain chains and the rain barrels, and then also having it be something that can be a community endeavor, right? So when you have bioswales and you don't just put all the stormwater in a pipe, it takes some maintenance, right? And so weeds grow in bioswales too. They don't always just look beautiful. And so getting the community together to do some community events and help maintain that can be something that's exciting, and just little artistic elements, sculptural features. Dark skies, again, this is something that's so easy to do. All you have to do is specify the light fixtures that don't let the light go up. It has to go down. And then you can protect your starscape. And so, next thing you know, we're having astronomy class that happens out here because we're the last spot where you can see the stars and those sorts of things as well. Our gardens and green spaces, again, wanting it to be beautiful but also productive. And so looking at edible landscaping throughout, this area, and trying to figure out ways to, have it places of respite where people can come and contemplate things and greenery, and then places where people can grow at all different scales will be also really important. Places that are pedestrian friendly were really inspiring to us, and taking it to the next level, because there's plenty of places in the country that are pedestrian friendly. They've got nice sidewalks and things, but here what we're thinking about is really looking at these European models where there actually aren't cars allowed in any of these images that I've shown here. And so what can we learn from that? The real challenge is going to be for us, because we figured out how to do it design-wise, but the challenge I think will be that it's so different than a normal development that happens in the county. The rules and regulations are more geared towards making you have roads everywhere and all that. So we're gonna have to work through that, but so far, so good. So neighborhood amenities too, places where people can come, cafes, coffee shops, little artist studios, those sorts of things, things that you don't currently have around. And so you can come and if you happen to be an artist, but you live in the neighborhood nearby, maybe, there's a studio you can set up, and, or if, there's somebody who's learning about how to run a business and they are, in the sort of educational cafe, or if they're in the, bakery and they're learning about baked goods, and you get to go buy a, croissant or whatever it is they're making at the time. Community gathering spaces, similar to the pedestrian friendliness, we were looking at these beautiful places around the world that have these wonderful little pocket parks and plazas and piazzas, and you don't see places like this in America for the most part. And so how do we create something that is so charming and so reminiscent of, and Sarah has all these experiences, and Josh and their family, of living in places like this. And they've been inspired by it, and they saw what kind of quality of life that it brought to them and their family. And so how do we bring something like that to the community? So we've been talking about housing because a lot of people have said, well, this sounds like somewhere I'd like to live. And initially it was more about the idea of the educational component and all these other things. But we saw, the Browns and their family might not like to necessarily have to leave their property, so at a minimum having a place for them, and there's lots of them. And then also the people who are working there, or who are associated with the facility, with the center, with the if they're a baker or an artist in residence or whatever. And the idea of having a multitude of different types of housing that can meet different needs and interests. But we've also figured out too that if we don't want to just do sort of a normal subdivision and it's all focused on housing, then we're going to need to really find a way to monetize it, because leaving the space open instead of developing it ultimately is leaving money on the table. And so we've been trying to think about how do you in a place like this, that's a real destination and a retreat and a learning center, how do you make money to doing that? And what Craig, as I was talking about the sort of reality check, Craig, sometimes Josh called him the wet blanket, he was talking about a lot of places like this make money on hospitality, right? And so people would come and they would stay and they would go to a Blue Zone weekend seminar or whatever the case may be. And so, so that's kind of part of what's in our head. And so figuring out the balance of how much of it is people coming and staying for, you know, a seminar or a conference or whatever, just for the joy of the weekend, or, and then an artist in residence, but also seniors. You know, there's a real desire to have this sort of transition of knowledge from one generation to the next. And so having some places for seniors and some families to live as well. So here's some single family attached, also known as townhouses in some places. These are American versions of that. Cottage courts, where these sort of smaller cottages face in on a green space or a little pocket park. So we've been looking at that. The idea of a multi-family house. So this is like 4 units. It looks like a single family house, so it could fit right in next to a house. And then a live-work, where somebody could have a shop on the ground floor and live above, is the idea there. And then just regular, you know, detached single-family cottages of various sizes. So we've been looking at everything from like tiny houses to regular-sized houses, and kind of matching some of what's around us as well, as we look at the edges of the property. Oh, here's tiny houses. If you haven't seen tiny houses, they're not all on wheels, right? A lot of them are, you know, for people who are, you know, have downsized, or we have people who a lot of times are really interested in this as their first home. They want to be a part of some kind of a really great community, but it's not something, they couldn't afford a big house somewhere else. Or we see people who have just come back, you know, their parents maybe live in the neighborhood with the bigger houses next door, or grandma is going to come and help, and she's going to live in a tiny house in the next neighborhood ever. So with the old world character, you know, the architecture is a big part of it, but also the layout is a big part of it, right? Figuring out how villages and hamlets around the world have been laid out and designed. And so this happens to be one of the things that I'm passionate about and I study and have for years. And so just looking at some inspiration for these, you know, these little moments here of, you know, kind of, you wonder what's around the bend, what's around that corner, you know, it sort of pulls you along. And then, you know, how do you go, what's behind and between these buildings, and, you know, this paving material here, how did they make the decision to change it like that? And all of those little details add up to the sum of the parts being wonderful and magical in places that are on postcards, right? Instead of just development. This is an awesome place I found. And here, it's kind of interesting, there's a car. It's actually allowed to go through there, and the pedestrians are there too, but this is my wife, and she's heading straight for it. She's not afraid, because the car is sort of creeping along, and the cobblestones under its tires make a noise. And so that driver, because this corner here is tight, they don't feel comfortable driving fast through there. And so this is nearly like what we call a pedestrian prioritized zone. You even see the outdoor dining is just right in the street. And then this is over in the Cotswolds, and, you know, some of the detached houses and these great stone walls that are made with all the local stone, and, you know, the pasture is just behind it. And but then, you know, coming back to America, right? And, you know, we have a bunch of amazing hamlets and small towns around the country that have a lot of the same attributes as these European places. They're just a lot newer, and, you know, we were, you know, a little bit more focused on cars and horses rather than just pedestrians like they were in some of these medieval towns in Europe. So we've talked about the idea of an agrihood, and so if you're not familiar with the term, an agrihood is just short for agricultural neighborhood. And so it kind of combines the idea of that farm life and some living and some, you know, mixed use and those sorts of things as well. And so you know, I always say that the farm is as important as any buildings that are built in a true agrihood. And here's a great one that's over Serene. We happen to be in an agrihood here as well. So we've got the farm area here and the neighborhood that goes with it. So planning wise, we had this sort of initial list of program that was, you know, we had started with some ideas, and we got some new ideas as we went and talked to people who participated over the week. And so some of these we've talked about already, some mixed use, the classrooms and meeting spaces, an inn and cottages to go along with the inn. We had the idea of like, what would be neat to have kind of a neat inn. And then the short and long-term opportunities for tiny houses and cottages, housing for seniors, staff, students, and families, teaching restaurant, teaching bakery, teaching cafes. And when I say teaching, basically it's like the old model where people would have apprentices and things, or, it's like, when you're doing a cooking class, it doesn't just have to be off to the side. If the results are good, why not put them up for sale? And so people can come and learn in an actual bakery. Tea room and library, art studios and galleries, educational greenhouse, community theater and an event space. So we had to drive a good ways to get here. Not too terribly far, but it's there aren't many spaces like this around, and so having something where you can have events and things happen will be kind of neat. Gardens, community agriculture, the hands-on livestock experience, aka petting zoo. Not really. They have these wonderful animals that are there, and they love people because they've been raised with people. The goats will just follow you around, and so it's part of the magic there. Farmers market and makers market, outdoor recreation and trails, courtyards, piazzas and plazas, and homeschooling, co-op, and training. So we had some initial design concepts. Oh, they're all coming in here. Oh, sorry. So the way that we work is when we started drawing, that my team and I all sort of individually broke up and worked on different plans without kind of knowing what the other one was doing. And the reason we do that is because new ideas will come out, and then we kind of pin them all up at one time, and we go through them as a team, and we talk about, what does everybody like about it. And so then we pinned all these up, and then the next day we came, Sarah had actually drawn this one and had taken all the ideas that she had heard us talking about and put it, kind of on paper here. And so that was really, really helpful for us to start to see, as I said, what's in her head. And then kind of going from all of these, we then combined even further, and then this is what we came up with. So this is the main road out here, the subdivision across the street, the entrance there. And we have the main driveway as it comes in now actually is offset from the intersection here. So you go through to the house. And so we thought, well, we need to line this up so that it works better. And instead of having this part of the alley of trees on the side, what if it was in the middle, right? And so it became this really cool row of trees in the median there. And if y'all want anybody, if I'm standing in front of you, happy to take those chairs over there because I feel like I'm blocking you. So you come in, and then here in the purple is the sort of an inn and conference center area, and then the little cottages that go along with the inn. Here we've got what we call pasture parking. So there's a big open space here where people currently park when they have events. And so we've sort of shown it lined off as appropriate parking lot. And then as you are in the inn, there's sort of a grand porch and a tower element kind of looking down the meadow. This is sort of a more of an informal big grassy area where sometimes people may play pickup soccer game or something like that. And then there's sort of the fence area here, and this is the horse pasture that's lined off with our pond for some of our stormwater elements and our fishing hole, I call it. And then a barn down at the end, so you look down the way here and see the barn reflecting in the pond down this long grand view. And then as you come around, this is sort of the more of the medieval village, some of the images that I was showing you with some of those European villages. And so what you see here, these are the darker buildings, are what we're calling mixed use, but any of these could be mixed. So you could have a home-based business in it or whatever, or it could just be a townhouse, however you wanted to do it. But amongst all these spaces are pocket parks and little plazas, and then another pocket park, and you kind of meander your way, and this is all pedestrian. So the only road in this actually is this white that goes here and connects into where the existing road ends at our property line. And then there's another road that's going to end at the property line here for the new development that's going in. So we've connected into those two to help with some of the regional traffic issues. And then we've got another parking area kind of tucked away back here. This is gravel in this case. Then we've got sort of the main, let's call it the main street, if you will, main pedestrian street that kind of flows in, and then this open space follows the trajectory of the driveway. and these face onto the courtyard and they face onto this green space. And then it kind of, you weave your way through, and then these are all existing trees. All of these dark patches are existing trees that we've saved and worked around them. And so we've got over here the existing house, and so we've transformed it into, you know, kind of this learning center and retreat area, possibly a little like a spa area for some wellness stuff as well. And there is currently the sort of market, little farmers market thing they have that from time to time happens in sort of in this area. So we're showing it here along a little path. So there's this space that's created. Right now their driveway kind of loops around these two grand trees. And so the driveway is converted into, you know, pedestrian zone. And these are these beautiful white pines that are peeking up between or behind these buildings. And there's a really big, it looks like a hemlock or some sort of tree there. And so we wanted to save that, and it's sort of peeking out between these trees. And there's a small berm here, and there's a staircase that kind of takes you up into this, to the next area as you make your way into the sort of medieval village. And then right now, this whole free range thing that we've been talking about, while, you know, by putting all the vehicular circulation, pushing it as far to that one side as we can, essentially you really can let your kids just sort of run free on the most of the property and not have to worry about them ever crossing a road. So, but we wanted to sort of take it one step further too, because sometimes there's really little kids, and being inspired by the idea of the sort of walled villages, the walled cities that you would see in Europe. We have sort of showing this wall that kind of goes around and connects from building to building in the learning village area here, which is where a lot of the co-op, homeschool co-op stuff would happen. And so you know, there's gates all around, so you can go in and out of it, but it really is a way to help keep the smaller kids in, where you don't have to worry about them ending up in the pond or something. And then here we've got an area for senior housing, some senior apartments in this bigger building here, and some tiny houses and cottages for seniors that are mixed in. Here we're showing the idea of the theater and event space, as well as the library. This is existing barns that are on the site right now, and then a couple of new buildings here to go along with some of these other features. And then along the edges, kind of matching the development pattern that you have with the existing subdivisions, single family houses along the way of roughly the same size, except for in this one little spot where the road came down, we made a cute little cottage court there.
Hey Brian, can't see the pointer.
Oh. Cute little cottage court there in the corner, and then all of these orange are we were imagining would just be regular, you know, for sale for people who are interested in sort of living here as part of this. And then the same thing down here. This tan though is not a regular road. This is what we call kind of the rural farm road. So this might be, you know, crushed gravel or something that's stabilized, because we need a way for the emergency service vehicles. It's one of we had somebody from fire department participate in one of our technical meetings, and they were talking about what they need to be able to provide, you know, adequate emergency service response. And so we know that they have a 150-foot hose pull, and from where the hydrant is to the hose has to be, you know, no more than 150 feet to a structure. And so here they basically have for, you know, farm equipment, for pedestrians, cyclists, and emergency service vehicles, this whole area where you can go around. There's additional parking here under these beautiful trees, and then that comes back out and hooks in. And then this also can be set up so that emergency service vehicles can go through there if necessary, just like you would see in a historic place that doesn't allow cars. They just, you know, have the ability to go in. It's paved properly for that. Here we see some gardens here. These are like raised beds, and then some row crops and things can happen elsewhere throughout. Some small animal pens here and here. And but the idea is that not everybody is going to want to live here, right? Some of the things here, while it may seem magical and wonderful, and the images I'm about to show you will make it seem even more so, we talked about this idea of friction, of what is it that the normal or average person is willing to sort of put up with in order to have a certain thing, an experience, right? And so in order for us to be able to do a lot of this pedestrian stuff going on, one of the things, the friction points, is you'll be parking in a remote or satellite area, right? So a lot of the parking happens here, or here. Some of these, we have, the opportunity for you to park directly on your lot, but behind your house, so that you don't see a bunch of garages. And so you see that in a lot of historic towns. You'll actually drive past the house, or there'll be a rear lane behind it. But we really wanted this to be pedestrian. And also, not everybody is going to be into the farm life. They may want to visit, but they may not want to live here, right? And so we want to make it that it's a nice place to visit, but we also like to live there, kind of a thing. So there's so many more things here, I'm sure, that I've forgotten about, but we'll be posting all of this online so you can study it. We'll put some annotations on the map too, so you can tell what things are, at least today, what we're thinking they might be. And again, we actually may have more on here than we need, right? So we're fitting it in based on the spaces we had available, based on trying to create these different spaces and things, but also preserving so much of the land. But ultimately, we're not sure, are we going to do this much stuff or not? So we're trying to play that out. This is kind of a neat diagram. This is our open space diagram. So everything that's green here is basically what's not built on. Again, if you look at most developments around the country or around the region, it would be the inverse of this, right? The green would be the white and the white would be the green, because there isn't much preserved. And the thing that's neat about it too is that each of these little buildings is really like the lot is the building footprint, right? You don't need a yard because you've got all of this green space and place to go run around. Just like in Europe and these places, they don't have yards, and well, again, not for everybody, but for some people. And I would wager to say that with as little as we have shown on here, probably pretty easy for us to actually find enough people who want to go and be part of this. So, and then the idea of having the shops on the ground floor and things, that's going to be really, really appealing to some people, and other people will want to visit and buy something in the shop, but may not want to live next to it, and that's okay. This is the pedestrian or the circulation network, and so you see the black is that one vehicular drive, and then the orange are kind of these farm sort of gravel drives, and then this crazy spider web of blue is our pedestrian infrastructure. So sidewalks and trails and little paths and things. It's remarkable, actually, when I started looking at it, and I actually took off some of the lines because it looked so busy. So there's even more to it than this, but it's kind of exciting. So this is the first view. So this is a view this is the actual house where it sits right now. It doesn't look like this right now. We were showing how they could, without having to tear down the house and totally transform, we were showing like the idea of if we just took and added some parapets to kind of where the house bumped out on the front, you could really transform the feel of it and make it feel a part of the village, and not like, what year was that house built? Yeah, not like a 1993 house, and here you can see some of the buildings that are around, that are surrounding it, and so this could be a single-family house, or you see there's a little sign there. This could be a shop on the ground floor. This is the senior building, the one piece of that. These are the two trees that are in front of the house, if you've been there, and kind of how that driveway has been transformed in this pedestrian zone. This is some of the kids with their lemonade stand. We were talking about how they teach entrepreneurialism, and some kid was, they're like, oh yeah, I made a lemonade stand. And so, and then at the co-op, they have these tents, these little teepees that people go and play in now. And if you've been out there, there are these turkeys that like to follow you around. Can you tell, this is like meaningful to me. So hopefully all these little Easter eggs, but, yeah, and then this is sort of their little, farmers and makers market that could happen along here. But the idea is that, all of this is sort of mixed together, and here's that staircase I mentioned that goes up the berm, the trees that are preserved, the white pines behind. And so this drawing, the way that we created all the drawings I'm about to show you, we took the plan that I just shared with you, We made a 3D model of it, and then our renderer drew on top of that 3D model. And so this isn't just like a theoretical idea, that I can show you where this view is on the plan, which is kind of neat. So this is the what we call East Pasture view from the north. So here's the sort of the inn and little conference building. These are some of those single family homes that could be for sale. This is the horse pasture. Here's the soccer meadow. Here's some of the community gardens. You probably can't see it back there, but this is what's called the climbing tree. And it has these amazing long flat branches, and there's tons of it. It's practically like a ladder. And so, you know, kind of paying homage to the climbing tree. And then here is the mud kitchen, right? And so just kind of having these little things, sort of still imagining that kids are just roaming around and running around and doing all these awesome things. And then there's a little tractor that's going down, and kids out there flying a kite, and you know, somebody standing up here on the tower looking down the long view there. And then buildings sort of peeking out from the woods. And these are some of the cottages that are associated with the inn as well. And then the greenhouse and potting shed that would be, you know, for the community to participate in. This is the view looking the other direction. So if you're sort of floating up above the inn, looking down, and so there's the barn that I said was reflecting in the pond down the way. And here's a different version of the greenhouse and potting shed. And you see the terrace outside, so you sit out and, you know, have a bite to eat, and, you know, little balconies, people peeking out, and rental cottages, and the little trails, gravel paths sort of meandering all through. There's a horse riding ring currently right now, which is what you see there. And then these are some of these for sale houses as well. And then here's sort of the tower looking out there. This is my favorite view. So this is the Piazza, one of the piazzas. There are several. And so, you know, again, I can show you right where this is on the plan. And you can just imagine, you see sort of down the way, you know, sort of beckoning you along. The trees are preserved, peeking up behind, you know, flower boxes and vines, you know, growing up the walls. And you know, we obviously lean quite heavily into the old world architectural style here, but in a place like this that's that magical, you can do it. I think, you know, if you do it right and you're very, you know, thoughtful about getting the architectural style correct, and so it doesn't feel like a cartoon of it. Like, oh, I saw a medieval village once and I designed a building after you know, a few years has passed, you know. So we want to make sure that everything we do feels really authentic, and so. In addition to, you know, kind of this old world aesthetic and, you know, the buildings sort of stepping in and out and having, you know, these are actually somewhat simple buildings. I mean, if you take off the half timbering here, this is just a rectangular box with a, you know, simple roof, and, you know, you add this cool balcony, and all of a sudden now it feels really magical. Again, similar, you know, we did this little detail here that you see in a lot of those villages, but besides that, it's actually quite a simple building to build. And so what we want to do is try to find ways to do something architecturally that doesn't spend a fortune on the actual structure of doing all the ins and outs and things that you do on a lot of conventional subdivisions today. And we, you know, make a simple building like they did in the old days with these really cool doors and windows and little additions like flower boxes and balconies and things. And that's what makes it really pop. But all the time, you know, places for people to gather and sit, and, you know, there's somebody talked about the idea of this program that they're working on to put benches around so that seniors can sit down. They schedule a time for a senior citizen to sit down with a kid and help with the, you know, with the kids' sort of well-being and all that. And so we've, you know, sort of showing these moments where people can have benches and those experiences. And you imagine the crunch of the gravel path as you walk around the plaza here, and you could hear that out your window, would be quite magical. So that's what we did this past week or so. We actually have, thanks. So we actually have 3 more renderings that we're working on, right? And so those will be released online. And so one's going to show that little cottage court up in the corner there. We have another one that's going to be sort of a bird's eye view looking down over the main sort of mixed use pedestrian area. and then one that's in the educational village, kind of looking at the theater area. So we're going to release those. Those will hopefully encourage you to come and check the webpage from time to time and sort of keep up with the progress. But even though I think we did a good bit of work over this past week or 2 weeks, however, we just ran out of time for those last 3. So anyway, thanks for listening to all that. I know it's like I'm excited about it, so I could go on forever. But